Welcome to Roman numerals lesson number 3. Okay, and in this lesson we're going to learn about rule number 3 for Roman numerals. Okay, in rule number 2 we saw that in most cases the Roman numerals are listed as big to small, right? Reading from left to right as a user, right? We saw some examples as well. Now in rule 3, we're going to talk about an exception to rule number 2, okay? Let me tell you what the rule is. It might be a little confusing initially, but once we go through examples, it'll be pretty clear, hopefully. Now, the interesting thing about rule 3 is that whenever you see 4 or 9 anywhere in a normal number, rule 3 should be used. Okay, again, you'll understand what I mean by this. Okay, all right. So here's a rule: the numbers I, X, and C can appear before the next two big numbers, okay, to create the exception to rule number 2. Okay, the value of such a sequence is big number minus small number. Whoa, you're saying that is confusing. Let me fix this. Okay. It's actually not. Once you get the idea of it, it's actually not, too confusing. Let's go through some examples. Okay. So let's take the number I. Okay. The value of the number is 1. The rule states that it can appear before the next two big numbers. Now, what are the next two big numbers to I? They are V and X. Remember, the sequence is I, V, X, L, C, D, and M. Okay? So, this rule is saying that I can have I and V, and I can also have I and X. Now, what is the value of I and V? Remember, I is appearing before V, which is an exception to rule 2. So in this case, the value of the big number is 5, which is V, minus the value of I, which is 1. So IV is equal to 4. Remember, that's why we talked about 4 or 9 here. Okay. Similarly, I and X. Now, X is valued at 10, I is 1, and this value is 9. So whenever someone says I and X, the value is 9. Whenever they say I and V, the value is 4. Okay, and again, remember, we talked about this. Okay, 4 or 9 anywhere. Let's take, now the rule states that this is valid only for I, X, and C. So let's take a look at X. So the next two big numbers, remember, it says that it can happen before the next two big numbers. So that means X can appear before L, or X can appear before C. If X appears before L, the value is the value of L, which is 50, okay, minus, in this case, the value of the X, which is 10, and therefore XL is 40. Excellent, no pun intended. Okay, now in this case, we have X and C. So now the value of the big number in this case is C, which is 100, minus the value of x here, which is 10. So x and c is equal to 90. The last example we'll see is for c. Let's write it here. So c can appear before the next two big numbers. So next two big numbers to c are d and m. So c and d is a valid sequence, and c and m is also a valid sequence. Now what is c and d? C and d would be the value of d, which is 500, okay, minus, remember we said the value of the sequence is big number minus small number. So that's minus 100. So the value for that is 400. Okay. And similarly here, it's C and M. The value of M is 1000 minus the value of C, which is 100. So the value for this sequence is 900. All right, so that is rule number 3. It's confusing, but you have to remember there are only 6 numbers that you have to remember: IV, IX, XL, XC, CD, and CM. That's it. And whenever you see 4 or 9, you know that you'll have to use rule number 3. And we'll see more examples, as we go along, which would make it a lot clearer. And that brings us to the end of lesson 3.